Overlong.
Overlong.
An overlong performance.
Overlook.
Overlook.
It's easy to overlook a small detail like that.
Nobody could overlook the fact that box office sales were down. Nobody could overlook the fact that box office sales were down.
She found him entertaining enough to overlook his faults. She found him entertaining enough to overlook his faults.
Our room overlooks the ocean. Our room overlooks the ocean.
Overlord.
Overlord.
Overly.
Overly.
Your views on economics are overly simplistic.
I'm not overly fond of cats. I'm not overly fond of cats.
Overmanning.
Overmanning.
Overmuch.
Overmuch.
At his age, he didn't care overmuch about impressing people.
Overnight.
Overnight.
Pam's staying overnight at my house. He became a millionaire overnight.
Reputations are not changed overnight.
An overnight flight to Chicago.
Overnight accommodation in London.
The show was an overnight success.
His overnight decision to become a vegetarian. His overnight decision to become a vegetarian.
Overnight bag.
Overnight bag.
He packed an overnight bag and left. Over-optimistic.
Over-optimistic.
Over-optimistic forecasts of economic growth.
Overpaid.
Overpaid.
Grossly overpaid football players.
Overpass.
Overpass.
Overpay.
Overpay.
Most big companies continue to overpay their top executives.
Try to recover any tax you have overpaid. Try to recover any tax you have overpaid.
Overplay.
Overplay.
His role in the group's success has been overplayed.
The unions overplayed their hand in the end and failed to get the pay rise they wanted. The unions overplayed their hand in the end and failed to get the pay rise they wanted.
Overpopulation.
Overpopulation.
Efforts to reduce overpopulation.
Our overpopulated cities. Overpower.
Overpower.
The security guards soon overpowered the man.
Her scent overpowered his senses.
She was overpowered by grief. Overpowering.
Overpowering.
An overpowering smell of rotten flesh. He felt an overpowering desire to slap her. Overpriced.
Overpriced.
Overprint.
Overprint.
Overproduction.
Overproduction.
The systematic overproduction of food. Overprotective.
Overprotective.
Overprotective parents.
Overqualified.
Overqualified.
I'm having trouble finding another job. Everyone says I'm overqualified.
Overran.
Overran.
Overrated.
Overrated.
A vastly overrated film.
Overreach.
Overreach.
The company overreached itself financially.
Overreact.
Overreact.
You always overreact to criticism. Many investors overreacted to the stock market crash.
Their response was an overreaction.
Override.
Override.
The EU Commission exercised its power to override British policy. The EU Commission exercised its power to override British policy.
The needs of the mother should not override the needs of the child. The needs of the mother should not override the needs of the child.
Can you override the automatic locking system?
A manual override.
Overriding.
Overriding.
A question of overriding importance. Their overriding concern is with efficient crime control.
Overripe.
Overripe.
Overripe bananas.
Overrule.
Overrule.
The House of Lords overruled the decision of the Court of Appeal. The House of Lords overruled the decision of the Court of Appeal.
They have the power to overrule the local council.
Overrun.
Overrun.
The final speaker overran by at least half an hour. The final speaker overran by at least half an hour. A tiny island overrun by tourists.
The house was overrun with mice.
Poland was overrun by the Russian army.
Cost overruns of £2 billion. Cost overruns of £2 billion.
Overseas.
Overseas.
Chris is going to work overseas.
Most applications came from overseas. Overseas students.
Overseas investment.
Overseer.
Overseer.
Oversee.
Oversee.
A team leader was appointed to oversee the project.
Oversell.
Oversell.
Tourism on the island is oversold.
Oversensitive.
Oversensitive.
Don't you think you're being a bit oversensitive?
Oversexed.
Oversexed.
Overshadow.
Overshadow.
Her interest in politics began to overshadow her desire to be a poet.
The achievement of the men's team was overshadowed by the continuing success of the women's team.
The threat of war overshadowed the summer of 1939.
A dark valley overshadowed by towering peaks.
Oversharing.
Oversharing.
Overshoe.
Overshoe.
Overshoot.
Overshoot.
The plane overshot the runway and plunged into a ditch.
The school has overshot its cash limit.
Oversight.
Oversight.
I assure you, this was purely an oversight on my part.
He has general oversight of all training courses.
Oversimplify.
Oversimplify.
To describe all these people as refugees is to oversimplify the situation.
Oversized.
Oversized.
An oversized jacket.
Oversleep.
Oversleep.
Sorry I'm late. I overslept.
Overspend.
Overspend.
The hospital has overspent its budget by £70,000.
An overspend of £200,000.
Overspill. Overspill.
An overspill of workers from London.
Overstaffed.
Overstaffed.
Overstate.
Overstate.
To say that all motorists speed in residential areas is overstating the case. To say that all motorists speed in residential areas is overstating the case.
The importance of a child's early years cannot be overstated.
It's an overstatement to say that the man's a fool.
Overstay.
Overstay.
They overstayed their visas and were arrested.
Overstep.
Overstep.
He has overstepped the bounds of acceptable behaviour.
She overstepped the mark and lost her job.
Overstock.
Overstock.
Overstretch.
Overstretch.
An overstretched social services department.
Problems only arise when people overstretch themselves.
Oversubscribed.
Oversubscribed.
All good schools are oversubscribed.
Oversupply.
Oversupply.
An oversupply of computers.
Overt.
Overt.
An overt attempt to silence their political opponents.
Overt race discrimination is illegal. Overt race discrimination is illegal.
An overtly political message.
Overtake.
Overtake.
He pulled out to overtake the van. Never try to overtake on a bend.
Television soon overtook the cinema as the most popular form of entertainment.
Hingis has now overtaken her in the world tennis rankings.
She was overtaken by emotion and started to cry.
A terrible sense of panic overtook him.
The diplomatic negotiations were soon overtaken by events.
Overtax.
Overtax.
Be careful you don't overtax yourself.
Over the counter.
Over the counter.
Over the top. Over the top.
Over the top.
It's a bit over the top to call him a fascist.
Overthrow.
Overthrow.
Rebels were already making plans to overthrow the government.
The organisation was dedicated to the overthrow of capitalism.
The overthrow of Mussolini.
Overtime.
Overtime.
6 hours overtime.
They're working overtime to get the job finished.
He's been doing a lot of overtime recently.
Many employees work countless hours of unpaid overtime.
Many of our offices will be working on overtime until the end of the year. Many of our offices will be working on overtime until the end of the year.
He earns £450 a week, including overtime.
As she put down the phone, her brain was working overtime.
His senses were working overtime.
Steve Smith scored all 9 of the Hawks' points in overtime. Steve Smith scored all 9 of the Hawks' points in overtime.
Overtired.
Overtired. Overtone.
Overtone.
There were overtones of anger in his voice.
Football songs with violent overtones.
The decision may have political overtones.
Overtook.
Overtook.
Overtop. Overtap.
Overture.
Overture.
They began making overtures to the Irish government.
She had rejected his overtures.
Overturn.
Overturn.
Leslie jumped to her feet, overturning her chair.
His car overturned, trapping him inside.
His conviction was overturned by the Court of Appeal.
Overuse.
Overuse.
Students tend to overuse certain words.
The overuse of natural resources.
Overvalue.
Overvalue. Overvalue.
Overview.
Overview.
An overview of the issues involved.
The document provides a general overview of the bank's policies.
This chapter gives a broad overview of the main concerns facing employers.
Overweening.
Overweening.
Overweening ambition.
Overweight.
Overweight.
Sally was 50 pounds overweight.
He is slightly overweight.
My luggage was overweight by 5 kilos.
Overwhelm.
Overwhelm.
Harriet was overwhelmed by a feeling of homesickness.
The children were overwhelmed with excitement.
Grief overwhelmed me.
We were overwhelmed by the number of applications.
They would be overwhelmed with paperwork. I was completely overwhelmed by his generosity.
We were overwhelmed by the sheer size of the place.
In 1532, the Spaniards finally overwhelmed the armies of Peru.
Overwhelming.
Overwhelming.
An overwhelming sense of guilt.
Felt an overwhelming desire to hit him.
She found the city quite overwhelming when she first arrived.
There is overwhelming evidence that smoking damages your health.
An overwhelming majority of the members were against the idea. The proposal has been given overwhelming support.
The British Air Force succeeded despite overwhelming odds against them.
Overwhelmingly.
Overwhelmingly.
Congress voted overwhelmingly in favour of the bill.
The response was overwhelmingly positive.
Overwinter. Overwinter.
These birds generally overwinter in tropical regions.
Overwork.
Overwork.
You've been overworking. Why don't you take a week off?
Have they been overworking you again?
A heart attack brought on by overwork.
Overworked.
Overworked.
An overworked doctor.
They're overworked and understaffed.
Overworked metaphors.
Overwrite.
Overwrite.
Do you want to overwrite the file?
Overwrought.
Overwrought.
Clara was tired and overwrought after all the problems of the last few days.
Overzealous.
Overzealous.
Overzealous fans.
Oviduct.
Oviduct.
Oviparous.
Oviparous.
Ovoid.
Ovoid.
Ovulate.
Ovulate.
Ovum.
Ovum.
Ow.
Ow.
Ow, that hurts.
Oh.
Oh.
I owe my brother $50. I still owe you for the taxi. How much do I owe you? The money owed to credit card companies.
He asked for help from a colleague who owed him a favour.
I owe Sean a letter. I must write soon.
Thanks a lot for being so understanding about all this. I owe you one.
Let's go and see Joe. He owes me.
You owe him an apology.
He probably owes his life to her prompt action.
I owe my parents a lot, he admitted.
He owes a great deal to his publishers. I owe it all to you. I owe it all to you. The debt that we owe to our teachers.
Their success owes more to good luck than to careful management.
Pearson's work owed much to the research of his friend, Hugh Kingsmill. Pearson's work owed much to the research of his friend, Hugh Kingsmill.
You owe it to your supporters not to give up now.
You owe it to yourself to take some time off.
Provinces owing allegiance to the emperor.
Owing.
Owing.
You need to pay the amount owing plus the interest. Owing to.
Owing to.
Owing to a lack of funds, the project will not continue next year.
Flight BA213 has been delayed owing to fog.
Owl.
Owl.
Owlet. Owlet. Owlish.
Owlish.
He was an owlish man with little round glasses.
Own.
Own.
Bring your own equipment.
Every dance has its own rhythm.
The yacht was intended for the king's own personal use.
His face was only a few inches from her own.
We have problems of our own.
I'd like to have a place of my own.
One day I want to have a horse of my very own. One day I want to have a horse of my very own.
She just wanted a place to call her own. She makes a lot of her own clothes.
We encourage students to develop their own ideas.
It's your own fault for leaving the window open. I've been living on my own for 4 years now.
He didn't want to be left on his own. You can't expect him to do it all on his own.
I can manage on my own, thanks.
I'm only telling you this for your own good. I'm only telling you this for your own good.
He was kept away from the other prisoners for his own safety.
Stephen can be too generous for his own good.
She wanted to get her own back on Liz for ruining her party. She wanted to get her own back on Liz for ruining her party.
Hilary's very much her own woman.
Great singers can take an old song and make it their own. Great singers can take an old song and make it their own.
The building is owned by the local council. You need to get permission from the farmer who owns the land. Many more people now own their own homes. The cost of owning a car.
A privately owned company.
She acts like she owns the place.
They walked in as if they owned the place. I own that I judged her harshly at first.
I must own to a feeling of anxiety. I must own to a feeling of anxiety.
Our team totally owned them.
Come on, own up. Who broke it?
No one owned up to breaking the window.
He was too frightened to own up to his mistake. He was too frightened to own up to his mistake. He still wouldn't own up to the fact that he'd lied.
Own brand.
Own brand.
Tesco's own brand tomato sauce. Owner.
Owner.
I met the owner of the local hotel.
The club's new owners.
He was now the proud owner of a bright red sports car.
Dog owners have been warned to keep their animals under control. Dog owners have been warned to keep their animals under control.
Owner-occupied.
Owner-occupied.
Most of these properties are owner-occupied.
Ownership.
Ownership.
A dispute over the ownership of the land.
The company was returned to private ownership in mid-1987.
The price of home ownership is increasing.
Own goal.
Own goal.
The minister's admission turned out to be a spectacular own goal. The minister's admission turned out to be a spectacular own goal. Own label.
Own label.
Oxbridge.
Oxbridge. Oxcart. Oxcart.
Oxeye.
Oxeye.
Oxfam. Oxfam. He always looks as if he buys his clothes from Oxfam. Oxford Circus.
Oxford.
Oxide.
Oxide.
Iron oxide.
Oxidize.
Oxidize.
Oxen.
Oxon.
David Jones, B.A., Oxen.
Oxtail.
Oxtail.
Oxyacetylene.
Oxyacetylene.
Oxygen.
Oxygen.
Oxygenate.
Oxygenate.
Oxygen bar.
Oxygen bar.
Oxygen debt.
Oxygen debt.
Oxygen tent.
Oxygen tent.
Oxygen mask.
Oxygen mask.
Oxymoron.
Oxymoron.
Oh yes.
Oh yes.
Oyster.
Oyster.
Oysterbed.
Oysterbed.
Oz.
Oz.
Ozone.
Ozone.
Ozone friendly.
Ozone friendly.
An ozone-friendly aerosol.
Ozone layer.
Ozone layer.
The hole in the ozone layer.
P.
P.
The bus fare was only 50p.
PA.
Pa. P.A. Pa.
PAC.
Pack.
Pace.
Pace.
The pace of change in our lives is becoming faster and faster.
Public spending continues to rise at a steady pace. Public spending continues to rise at a steady pace.
You need to step up the pace of your exercises.
Lucy set off at a leisurely pace back to the hotel. He quickened his pace, longing to be home.
Traffic slowed to a walking pace.
He took a pace towards the door.
Rebecca walked a few paces behind her mum.
Salaries have not always kept pace with inflation.
The supply of materials cannot keep pace with demand.
Slow down. I can't keep pace with you.
The test driver puts all the cars through their paces.
Japanese firms have been setting the pace in electronic engineering.
The Italians set the pace for the first 8 laps.
Measures designed to force the pace on alternative energy policies. Measures designed to force the pace on alternative energy policies.
If you can stand the pace, working in advertising pays well. I found Mark at the hospital, pacing restlessly up and down. I found Mark at the hospital, pacing restlessly up and down.
Sam stood up and paced the floor, deep in thought.
Nikki paced herself and came through the ranks to win.
You need to pace yourself and decide which tasks are the most important.
The director paced out the length of the stage.
Pacemaker.
Pacemaker.
Pace setter.
Pace setter.
That left him 3 strokes behind the pace setter Perry.
A new company, now seen as the industry's pace setter.
Pachinko.
Pachinko.
Pachyderm.
Pachyderm.
Pacific.
Pacific.
A normally Pacific community.
Pacifier.
Pacifier.
Pacifism.
Pacifism.
Pacifist.
Pacifist.
The pacifist movement.
Pacify.
Pacify.
You're right, Rita said in order to pacify him. Economic reforms are needed to pacify and modernize the country.
Pack.
Pack.
I forgot to pack my razor.
Have you finished packing yet?
Kelly packed her things before breakfast.
You'd better pack your bags. We're leaving in an hour.
Shall I pack us a picnic?
Now wild mushrooms are available all year, packed in handy 25-gram boxes. Now wild mushrooms are available all year, packed in handy 25-gram boxes.
50,000 fans packed into the stadium.
The sheep had been packed into a truck and transported without food or water.
Glass must be packed in several layers of paper.
Pack the soil down firmly.
The Spanish wine with the flavour of honey packed quite a punch. The Spanish wine with the flavour of honey packed quite a punch.
Christmas was over and the decorations packed away.
We packed a lot of sightseeing into 2 weeks.
In an essay of 2,000 words, you can pack a lot in.
Any film starring Tom Cruise always packs them in.
After 1 year, I packed in university. After 1 year, I packed in university.
Sometimes I feel like packing it all in and going off travelling.
Halfway to the airport, the engine packed in.
My parents used to pack us off to camp every summer.
Most of the holiday makers had packed up and gone. I gave her a hand, packing up her clothes and stuff.
Don't worry, the removal men will pack everything up. What time do you pack up? Oh, about 6. The photocopy is packed up again. He packed up his teaching job after only 3 months. He packed up his teaching job after only 3 months. A pack of 3 T-shirts.
Send away for your free information pack today. Send away for your free information pack today.
A pack of cigarettes. A 10-ounce pack of frozen peas.
A wolf pack. A pack of hounds.
A pack of reporters were waiting outside.
Don't believe what it says in the paper. It's a pack of lies.
Package.
Package. There's a package here for a Miami Lakes address. A package of meat.
The government has announced a package of measures to assist affected areas. The government has announced a package of measures to assist affected areas.
Many banks are offering financial packages for students.
The code informs us where and when a product was packaged.
The videos were packaged up, ready for distribution.
They try to package their product to give it mass appeal.
Package deal.
Package deal.
A cheap package deal to Tenerife. The Commission attempted to bring all 3 proposals into one package deal.
Package tour.
Package tour.
Packaging.
Packaging.
Plastic packaging.
The date of packaging.
The packaging of the company image.
Pack animal.
Pack animal.
Packed.
Packed.
A packed courtroom.
The island was packed with tourists.
A new magazine packed with exciting recipes.
Houses tightly packed in rows.
Packed lunch.
Packed lunch. Packed out.
Packed out.
Packer.
Packer.
Packet.
Packet.
A packet of envelopes. A packet of cigarettes.
A cereal packet. Packets of ketchup and mustard.
Paul tore open the packet as soon as it arrived. I bet that car cost him a packet.